Welcome everyone to the new rules for stormwater permits, a watershed tools for local leaders webinar. We will be recording this webinar. Please sign your name and affiliation into the chat. We will hold questions and answers for the end. Please type all questions into the chat or the Q&A. Please remain muted throughout the presentation to avoid any background noise. My name is Tracy Gordon, Outreach Coordinator and Science Program Associate here at Raritan Headwaters Association. RHA is a 501c3 nonprofit conservation organization. Since 1959, Raritan Headwaters has focused on one thing: clean, safe water for all. We engage citizens and decision makers in the protection of our watershed and beyond through our award-winning science and education programs, land preservation, and advocacy. We are the region's leading provider of water quality research, habitat restoration, and water protection services. We preserve and steward critical watershed lands. RHA plays a decidedly unique role as no other organization offers a similar scope of services focused primarily on the Raritan Headwaters watershed. We do have an upcoming watershed tools for local leaders coming up in September. There's the information. I will be sending more out. Our watershed tools for local leaders provides practical guidance on scientific principles, government regulations, and funding sources for watershed protection. These seminars are offered to decision makers and other stakeholders for 38 municipalities and 3 counties within our watershed area. Our goal is to provide expert level knowledge, practical information, resources, and partnerships to assist local leaders and citizens alike to make informed decisions to protect and preserve our water resources. So I'm putting up this wanted poster for local leaders and stakeholders to participate in the Highlands Watershed Restoration and Protection Plan. The project's going to identify and prioritize projects that will be improving the quality of water in our region, focusing primarily on the north and south branches of the Raritan River and the Black and the Lamington River. This project is funded by a grant through the Highlands Council. Chris Obropta at the Water Resources program at Rutgers is leading, and we are also partnering with him as well as the New Jersey Water Supply Authority. The advisory committee will meet about 2 to 3 times per quarter throughout the middle of 2025 approximately, so it's not a huge time commitment. Useful information in this plan will be very useful when you go to prepare your watershed protection plans. All municipalities must do this as a part of the new rules for stormwater permitting. More information on this, please contact me. I can send you really more information, a draft of the proposal for the plan, etc. etc. Let me just go back to that. You can look at that more. So Chris Obropta has graciously made time in his very busy schedule to speak to us regarding the new stormwater rules. He's been working in watershed management for a very long time. His determination to create innovative solutions to water quality issues is ceaseless. I don't think the man sleeps. I really don't. Bill Kibler will also be presenting. He has served as the executive director for the South Branch of the Watershed Association from 2005 to 2011 before the merger, which formed Raritan Headwaters Association in 2012. He holds a law degree specializing in environmental law. His knowledge here is so highly valued at Raritan Headwaters Association, as well as throughout our watershed community. We couldn't have a better advocate than Bill. So with that, I am going to unshare my screen. If I can figure out how to stop sharing. And I'm going to let Chris pull up his screen. And it's all you, Chris.
Yeah, you need to let me share. I'm disabled for sharing.
You are disabled from sharing. Co-host. Do I make you a co-host?
Yeah, sure. That sounds good.
What I do?
I can do that.
Yes. That might.
There you go.
Let
I
me
can
know.
share now. Perfect.
Yay. I want you to share. Thank you.
Okay. Can everybody see this screen?
Yes.
Excellent. Excellent. So A couple things before I get started. I first apologize. There's a lot of words in this presentation. It's very hard to give a talk about this without having a lot of words in it. I already emailed the presentation to Tracy as a PDF, so she'll send it out to everybody who participates. I also emailed Tracy a document called Understanding the New MS4 Permit that New Jersey Future released in collaboration with One Water Consulting. It's a short document. It's very good, especially if you're a Tier B municipality. And now if you become a Tier A municipality, it really tells you what new things you have to do. So it's a really nice document and very colorful. So I suggest you all take a look at that. So let me go forward here. So I'm going to go through the different sections of the permit. The permit came out January 1st, 2023. And we're going to go march through each one of these briefly and talk about them. Some we'll spend a little bit more time on than others. And you can see, we have, I'll probably just end at the Section H, the Watershed Improvement Plan, which will be the last thing we'll talk about today. So the whole idea with this is that every town in New Jersey has a permit for their MS4 system, and the MS4 system is the municipal separate storm source system, and that's where the 4S's come from. And the idea is to really have a stormwater management program in a town that makes sure their systems are working properly as designed, that they're being maintained, and trying to remove as much pollution to the maximum extent practical as the systems were designed. There's a lot in here about the permittee. The permittee in this case is the township, the municipality, the city. One thing they have to do is develop this stormwater pollution prevention plan. What's nice about that is DEP has given a template for that. And basically it's about 25 pages, and they're just sheets you fill information in, blanks, and you just can fill information in and print it out. So it's not a huge lift. I mean, there's some work going into gathering the information you need to put into each of the sheets, but it's really, DEP's gone out of their way to lay this out for people and make it as easy as possible. The town also needs to identify a stormwater program coordinator. It needs to let DEP know who that person is. That person needs to be specially trained. We'll talk about that later. But this is the person who's in charge of the MS4 permitting program in the town. They're going to be the person who files the annual report to DEP. And when DEP has questions about the program, this is going to be the first point of contact that they go to. Okay. The other piece of this is that they want to make sure that this MS4 program, stormwater program that's being created, and the stormwater pollution prevention plan are consistent with the municipal stormwater management plan. So that means you have to update your municipal stormwater management plan. And they want your municipal stormwater management plan also to be a component of the municipal master plan. Okay. And then finally, they want to make sure that you update all your ordinances to reflect these new requirements that are given out as part of the MS4 permit, and that includes your stormwater control ordinance. We'll talk a little bit about that. Now, where I say permittee shall do all these things, it's not optional. This is a permit. Your town has a permit. You don't do these things, you could be subject to an enforcement action by New Jersey DEP. I just got off the phone yesterday with some folks down in Atlantic City, actually an attorney for the city, asking me if I could do some stormwater training for them, because they're in the midst of trying to resolve an enforcement action that was placed against them because they were complying with their MS4 permit. So the state and EPA are going after people. It's not that they're not going after people, but DEP really wants people to try to comply and trying to help people all on the way to do that. And of course, Rutgers is here, and Raritan Headwaters Association is here to help you too. So Section B of the permit really talks about public involvement and participation. They require you to have a website, and on that website, they want you to put all these different things, these different ordinances, these different plans. Everything goes up on the website. They actually give you a template for the website, how to create it. So before, a lot of towns would have their stormwater pollution prevention plan or their stormwater control ordinance or the stormwater management plan buried on their municipal website. Now you have to have a specific website for stormwater. And you can see on the bottom here, you have to have the stormwater coordinator's contact on there. So if people have issues, they know who to contact and who to call. So if somebody asks you to be the stormwater coordinator, just realize what you're getting into, okay? Section C requires there to be some public education. And this was me when I was very young, when I first started at Rutgers, and the little guy in the red hat is my son Cody, who's now 29 years old and helps me teach classes. He's a civil engineer, and he helps with the Green Infrastructure Champion classes now. So I've come a long way since this photograph. But the idea is you have to get 12 points, and each of these different activities you could do gets you points. There's 5 different categories. You have to get points from at least 3 categories. Here's a list of the categories. Next to each phrase is points. Sometimes they're maximum points, sometimes they're partial points. What happens is you get points for putting in a sign at a stormwater management facility, and then you can get points for maintaining the sign at a stormwater management facility. So there's different ways to get these points. I think what's important about this is that every time something's happening in your town, whether it's the Raritan Headwaters Association giving a presentation, or whether it's the AmeriCorps ambassador, or maybe it's just something that's going on at the Elks Club about stormwater. Document it, take credit for it, and get the points for it out of this. It's very important. Okay. So there's a section D, which is about construction controls during construction operations, but there's really a separate permit for that in New Jersey. We get a permit from the Soil Erosion Sediment Control district for that. So we're not going to talk about that here, but we will talk about section E, which is the minimum standards for post-construction stormwater management for new and redevelopment. So this is the stormwater management regulations that DEP passed and then passed again, and then just issued another revision to that last year. And the whole idea is the goal is to reduce the impact of stormwater runoff on water quality, quantity, and the loss of groundwater recharge. So 3 components are here: quality, quantity, and groundwater recharge, all important components. These apply to major development that serves more than 1 acre or increases impervious cover by 1/4 acre. Now, you as a municipality, when you write your stormwater control ordinance, which is where all this stuff will go into, you can change this. You can make major development 1/2 acre and 1/8 of an acre. You change whatever you want, as long as you don't increase it. It's got to be at least as stringent as New Jersey DEP. There's other groups that have added a definition for minor development. So anything that disturbs less than 1 acre or adds less than 1/4 acre of impervious coverage still has to do some level of stormwater management. So I believe the Watershed Institute has a draft of an enhanced stormwater control ordinance that would allow you to take into account major and minor development. So if you're in an area that has a lot of homes already built, there's not a lot of new development going in, but there's a lot of additions going on, a lot of rebuilds going on, you may want to think about adding that minor development component to your stormwater control ordinance. So here's the requirements: water quantity, the same thing we've always done. Look at the 2, the 10, the 100-year storm, and try to reduce the amount of runoff that's coming from those storms as far as the quickness of the runoff, the peak flow of the runoff. The 2-year storm, chance of getting a 2-year storm is 1 in 2 this year. It's 50% chance. The 10-year storm is 1 in 10, and the chance of getting a 100-year storm is 1 in 100. Okay, so that's what those numbers represent. And they have different values for different counties, and I'll show that to you in a second. Groundwater recharge, you have to maintain 100% of your annual average groundwater recharge. So basically, if you have a 50-acre wooded land or agricultural land as you're turning into homes, if it was recharging 1 million gallons of stormwater a year, after you put the homes up, you have to be recharging 1 million gallons of stormwater a year. So not that hard, not that complicated. New Jersey gets about 50% of its water from groundwater, so we want to make sure we recharge those aquifers wherever we can. And then finally, quality is the issue. They want you to install a BMP, or it's called a best management practice, to reduce at least 80% of the sediment, the total suspended solids that's coming off. And then also make sure that those are built in a way that to also remove nutrients to the maximum extent feasible, so phosphorus and nitrogen. And why do we want to do that? Well, phosphorus, when it gets in fresh water, makes algae grow. becomes a limiting nutrient. And when the algae grows, it really starts to cause these harmful algal blooms, among other things that are very detrimental to water quality. On the right-hand side is a table that DEP has for different management practices and how much removal rates they get. But that's only if you build it in accordance with the best management practice manual. So if you want to get 90% removal for bioretention, you have to design it and build it in accordance with this manual. Okay, this is the only time this manual is part of the requirements, is if you're building a stormwater management practice to get a certain total suspended solids reduction, then you have to design in accordance with the manual, so it becomes really part of the regulations. They did revisions in 2019 to this, and the revision were basically adding, removing the non-structural stormwater management strategies component and kind of replacing it with green infrastructure. So now, instead of building that big basin at the bottom of the hill, you have to build smaller green infrastructure practice throughout the entire development to better manage stormwater and capture water where it lands as opposed to where it runs off to. And then the other thing they did was they said, we just really want to focus the quality piece on motor vehicle surfaces. Now, some of us disagree with this. We believe that it should be all impervious surfaces, but DEP thinks motor vehicle surface is the only thing that's important here, so that's why they changed the rule. So green infrastructure, there's a definition that DEP has here, and the way I refer to it is that we're putting smaller practices in closer to the water, where the water lands, so at the end of the downspout, right near the road, so the water doesn't have a chance, the rainwater doesn't have a chance to become stormwater runoff, pick up pollution, and carry it downhill to where we would normally put our big detention basin. So these green infrastructure practices filter water with soil, vegetation, or they store water for reuse. DEP has these tables in there, and these are very important if there's development going in your town, and they have to address water quality and groundwater recharge as required by the regulations. They can only use the management practices that are in table 1. They can use the ones in table 2 if they want to deal with quantity. And there's a table 3 that they can use those practices, but only if they get a variance. And it's rather difficult to get a variance based on the way the permit is written. Okay, so these are the tables that we have here, and you can see the practices on the left, and then it tells how much TSS is being removed, or total suspended solids. So does it satisfy, can you use it to satisfy the quantity requirement? Yes and no's. Can you use it to satisfy the recharge requirement? And then there's some characteristics on the right of seasonal high water table. So for example, bioretention will get a 90% removal if you have 2 feet between the bottom of the system and the seasonal high water table. If you have 2 feet, it also will allow you to recharge the water into the ground. If you don't have 2 feet, only 1 foot, then you can't use this system as a recharge system. Okay, so that's kind of how that works out. And you can see all the different ones here. We'll talk a little bit more about this in a second. I just kind of mentioned this too. There are drainage area limits on all this stuff. So, for example, if you're going to put a bioretention system in, the largest drainage area you can have is 2.5 acres. So if you have a 25-acre site, you're going to need 10 of these systems scattered throughout the site to be able to treat the entire site. So that's the new kind of new requirement. That becomes very difficult for a lot of developers, and now they have to really think about stormwater management up front. Before, it was usually an afterthought once they put the development where they wanted, where they squeeze stormwater management in. Now it really has to be something that's thought about up front. Table 2, this is more for quantity. Okay, it does groundwater recharge too, but so these are some of the same systems that we saw in the first table. There's a thing in here, constructed wetlands. A lot of people don't want to do constructed wetlands because they believe that once they build that, it acts as a regular wetland. They have to put a buffer on it and things like that. So if they wanted to add future development, they may be limited because of their stormwater feature they built as a wetland. And this is table 3, which is more traditional things that we've used to use. And once again, you need to get a variance to be able to use the stuff in this table. So the practicality of this is that there's 4 systems in here that you can use to get water quantity, water quality, and groundwater recharge. And that's the bioretention system. We often refer to that as the rain garden, infiltration basins, pervious paving systems, and sand filters. So you can see here's a rain garden, shallow landscape depression, picture of one here. So this will get groundwater recharge. This will allow you to manage water quantity and will also allow you to reduce your total suspended solids by 80%. Here's an infiltration basin, basically a basin with a sand bottom. Once again, this can only take a drainage area of 2.5 acres, so it's be much smaller than the ones we've seen in the past that are 1 acre in size, right? So you can see here, you get a layer of sand, the water comes in, filters through the sand, it goes into the ground. I'm kind of unsure why they call this an infiltration basin, and later on they call the other one a sand basin. So we'll see that here. So this is showing how you can use it to manage quantity as well as quality and groundwater recharge. So the middle piece here, let's see, got my laser pointer on here. So this middle piece here, we'll do the groundwater recharge and treat for water quality. And then when the water rises up, it'll fill up the rest of this area. And now you have water quantity being treated as well. And you can see this shows that here, a little bit of water in here for the water quality design storm. And then the bigger storms gets deeper, deeper, and deeper. So a nice system to use. Pervious pavement systems, very good. Porous asphalt's the most common one. The water passes right through the asphalt, goes into the stone layer below it, and the water will slowly percolate into the ground. This stone has no fine material. It's clean stone. The porosity is about 40%. So for every 2.5 gallons of stone, you can store a gallon of water. So this is a really nice system you can use. And now you have your stormwater management system under the parking lot. So maybe you save some land for other development. Okay. Here's a sand filter, same thing as the infiltration basin. The sand filter does have, it shows topsoil and turf grass on top of it. So water kind of goes in here and filters through the sand bed and then makes its way out. Same kind of thing here. And you could see water quality storm, and then you could design it with an under drain system too if you can't get infiltration. So maybe you don't need to get groundwater recharge because your site was already all clay and wasn't recharging any groundwater before. Remember, you have to maintain 100% of your annual average groundwater recharge. If you go to a 50-acre site that has a lot of clay and there's no groundwater recharge now, the groundwater recharge is 0, then after you develop, it can be 0. You don't have to recharge anything. So sometimes you can get out of doing that groundwater recharge requirement depending on how bad your soils are in the area. So DEP came up with these stormwater management rules, Flood Hazard Control Act. Last July, they passed this. And what they did was they actually got Cornell to do a climate change model, and they projected how much the 2, the 10, the 100-year storm would increase for the year 2100. And they want you to design for this, obviously. So I'm in Somerset County, so you can see the 2-year storm increases by 19%, 10-year by 24%, and 100-year storm by 48%. What they also did was they extrapolated the storms we're using now is based on data through 1999. So they extrapolated from 1999 to 2020 with real data, and they increased those storm events too. So the 2-year storm didn't change in Somerset County, but the 10-year went up 3%, and the 100-year storm went up 9%. So right now, well, up to a few months ago, what we were designing was for the 100-year storm was 9% smaller than it should have been. The storm was bigger than we were designing for, but now these regulations require you to do that. So there's a section in here, and this is probably the most complex section of the regulations of the permit, section F. This is kind of pollution prevention, good housekeeping standards. So this is a section that requires all towns to adopt these ordinances. So you have to pass these ordinances. DEP has a sample of these ordinances on their website. You can get them from ANJAC, you can get them from the Watershed Institute, I believe, too. The new ordinances that came out are privately owned salt storage and tree removal and replacement ordinances. So those have to be passed. The private owner salt storage, basically, if you're a corporate center and you got a mound of salt in your parking lot in the winter, it's got to be covered and be treated properly so it doesn't wash off. And the tree removal and replacement ordinance requires that if trees are cut down on public or private property, they have to be replaced at a certain rate. So there's sample ordinances for that. There's also community-wide measures, and that requires such as street sweeping. So any road that has an inlet on it has to, and curbing has to be swept. Well, no, just an inlet on it has to be swept 3 times a year. If you don't have any inlets on the road, it has to be swept once a year. Now, I'm going to tell you right now, that's not enough to keep the rivers clean. It should be more, but this is the minimum requirement that DEP has. Storm drain labeling and retrofitting, herbicide management, basically don't apply an herbicide near the storm drains. De-icing material, they want you to remove it within 72 hours after the storm from the roadways. Roadside vegetated waste management, so proper disposal of that, and then roadside erosion control. They want you, as your public works guys are going through town, when they identify any roadside erosion, they want it documented, and then they want it fixed within 90 days. Inspection and maintenance of stormwater facilities that are owned and operated by the town. That's kind of a big part of this. So all the detention basins that the town owns have to be inspected regularly. And number 4 is all the detention basins that are privately owned have to also be inspected. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. They have a lot on maintenance yards, and I'll go through some of that. And there's a lot here on training. So we'll go through some of these. So the inspection and maintenance stuff that we're required to do. So you're required to inspect your storm drain inlets and clean them and maintain them. So the inlet is just a grate on top of the catch basin. The catch basin is the box beneath it. I think I have a picture of it here. So this is the inlet, and this is the catch basin. Okay. So we have to inspect those and clean those on a regular basis. Your MS4 conveyance system has to be inspected and cleaned. So that's the piping that connects those catch basins. So this is not a trivial thing if you have to go and inspect all these. So I think a lot of people, when they're inspecting these basins and they find that they have to be cleaned out, they also inspect the inlet and outlet pipe to make sure that they're flowing freely. And that's probably enough to satisfy this requirement, because they're very vague in the permit about this requirement. Stormwater infrastructure inspection and maintenance, and then there's maintenance logs and reports that have to be done. So these are just basic definitions that we have. And here's some of the requirements. The inlet has to be inspected once per year. So that's the grate on the surface. Now, if you're street sweeping a road once a year, 3 times a year, while you're street sweeping, you could also be visually inspecting that. So that might be okay. Get away with that way. Catch basins have to be cleaned once every 5 years. Inspected once every 5 years and cleaned if necessary. So what's if necessary? Well, if a third of the basin is filled with sediment, it's got to be cleaned. Okay. Now, some basins may need to be cleaned once every 5 years. As you're going through and inspecting your system, your stormwater system, you may realize that there's a series of basins that have to be cleaned annually or maybe twice a year because of leaf collection in the basins. Inspecting, conveying your conveyance system. We talked a little bit about that. Now, the stormwater infrastructure, the detention basins and retention basins. So the difference between a detention basin and a retention basin, a detention basin goes dry between storms. It's one of those grass basins that get mowed every week usually. A retention basin is basically called a wet pond. So when it rains, the stormwater gets stored on top of the surface of the water. So that's how it provides stormwater management. But both of these are stormwater infrastructure, and they have to be inspected in accordance with their approved maintenance manual. Now, my experience is that most of the stormwater infrastructure, the detention basins in town, do not have approved maintenance plans. So if you don't have approved maintenance plans, you have to do this. If there's no approved maintenance plan, inspect at least 4 times a year, and after each storm exceeding 1 inch of rainfall. This is crazy. This is a lot of work. So my suggestion is, if you have a detention basin or retention basin that doesn't have a maintenance plan, write a maintenance plan for the basin, and in that maintenance plan, identify that it needs to be inspected only once a year annually. And that would help you out a lot. Okay. So the other piece of this is that there's a lot of basins that are owned by homeowners association. Well, how do we manage that? Well, the homeowners associations, the town is required to make sure that their basins are functioning properly. And one way the town does that is they usually pass an ordinance requiring any private property owner who owns any kind of stormwater infrastructure to provide an annual report to the town saying that it's working properly and it has been inspected. Now, my experience with that is towns have passed those ordinances, and sometimes they only get 30 to 50% compliance with that. But there's an opportunity to go back and have fines on top of that if you have to. But if a homeowner association detention basin isn't working properly and causes problems, it's not going to be on them. It's going to be on the town, because in the town's permit, it says you have to make sure that all these systems are functioning properly, right? So once again, it falls on the town to ensure that's happening. And then you got to log all these activities. This is the biggest problem with this stuff, is that the public works guys are doing all this cool work, but they're not documenting it. So come May, when they have to file their annual report, the stormwater coordinator, he doesn't have enough information, or she doesn't have enough information to file the report. So you really have to document everything that's happening. We have to make those maintenance and repairs within 90 days. We'll talk a little bit about the outfalls in a minute. Some of these repairs may take a lot longer. And then you have to certify in your report that all this has been done. Okay, that annual report that you fill out in May also certifies that any development that went into town, that was built in your town, that's a major development, is in compliance with the stormwater management regulations. So in other words, if you let a 50 home subdivision go in your town and you say, oh, you don't need to worry about groundwater recharge, when they really did, then ultimately the town is going to be liable because they're in violation of their MS4 permit. And we saw this in the town in Mercer County. They let development go in. It wasn't properly designed to satisfy stormwater regulations. And the town had to come in later and spend $450,000 to fix that development of taxpayer dollars, because that developer already got his bond back. He was already gone. So it was on the town's responsibility to fix that. And nobody wants their tax dollars going to pay to fix development that should have been built in the first place. So you got to keep on top of this. Okay, maintenance yards are insane. This is a whole list of things that DEP wants you to do. I was just going to show you the titles of the different items, documenting the best management practices in the yard, having spill kits in the yard, having standard operating procedures for fuel operations, vehicle wash water containment, right? Salt and other granular ice material storage, handling, and it goes on. Aggregate materials, coal patch, street sweeping stuff. All this stuff has to get done by the maintenance yards. The public works director needs to be aware of this. He needs to be able to have a checklist and go through this and do a regular inspection of his yard to make sure he's in compliance. A lot of times you're not going to be in compliance, but if you're not in compliance, then you're going to write up a little plan of how you're going to get in compliance. And usually that's enough to get you out of getting in trouble with New Jersey DEP, that you have a strategy for coming into compliance. Okay. So that's very, very important. Okay. Stormwater training. The stormwater program coordinator, the person is supposed to be in charge of the permit, has to be trained once per permit cycle. So once every 5 years, the permit cycle is 5 years. Then there's annual employee training, and it's supposed to cover all this stuff. What's in the stormwater pollution prevention plan, what are your community-wide ordinances and measures. So all this stuff is supposed to be covered in that training. When you do these trainings, you have to document who was there, who did the training. It's a great idea to get a copy of the PowerPoint presentation. Some of this stuff may be done online. So if you're doing it using an online system, where it's like the staff are watching a video online, you need to find a way to document that and reference where that video is and what video it was that you watched to make sure it complies with these requirements. Okay. Other things you have to do, there's a stormwater management design review training. So the town engineer who is reviewing plans has to be trained. And he has to be trained once per permit cycle. Most of these guys have done this already and are good at that, but it's an important thing to make sure, if you're the stormwater coordinator, to know that your township engineer has been trained, have a copy of a certificate, this training certificate, the date he took the class. That's very important. Stormwater management rule amendments. So DEP is constantly changing the stormwater management regulations. Whenever they change regulations, you have to do a whole nother training, usually for the municipal body. So, and then municipal board and governing body training. So there's a video that we had done a while ago, asking the right questions, and usually just ask the board members to watch that. But that has to be done once per every term. So in November, there'll be new mayors and new council members and township committee members, and they should take this training. Okay. Section G is all about mapping and scouring and legal connections. So these are all things that have to be mapped. Okay. So when you're looking at this, mapping the outfalls, that's not that hard. It's pretty easy to do that. But you not only have to map the outfall, eventually, when you do the watershed improvement plan, you're gonna have to determine the drainage area of the outfall. So how much land does that outfall drain? Which land does it drain? And that's very complicated, very time consuming, okay? We've done that for a town. It's not an easy thing to do. Groundwater discharge points, are there any places where your stormwater system discharges to groundwater? Are there any interconnections between other towns? You have to have all your storm drain inlets mapped, the manholes mapped, the piping mapped, the pumping stations mapped, and the stormwater facilities mapped. And you have to show where your maintenance yard is. And some towns may have multiple maintenance yards. You have to show all of them in that mapping. There's stream scouring, that's a requirement. So every outfall that goes to a stream must be inspected at least once every 5 years. If you find that there's scouring occurring and there's problems with that, that has to be repaired. And you have a year to make those repairs. Talk a little bit about that in a second. The last piece here is illegal connections. So when you're inspecting your outfalls, you want to do it during dry weather. In other words, it hasn't rained in 3 days. Because it hasn't rained in 3 days and the outfall is flowing, it could be an illicit connection. So it could be a wastewater line hooked up to it. In most cases, groundwater is just seeping into the pipe. But there's protocol to go back and test those outfalls that are flowing after 3 days of dry weather and to make sure that they're not an illegal connection. So when you detect one, you have to fix it right away. You have a year to fix it. So if you go and you test it and you find out there's pathogens in there, somebody's sanitary lines hooked up to that storm source system, you have 1 year to figure out where it is. Well, 30 days to figure out where it is, and actually 1 year to fix it, to remediate it. So the stormwater outfalls are interesting, and how to fix a scour with that. There's a lot of different ways to do that, but most of this is you're working in the stream, and most of this stuff costs a lot of money. So the question becomes, okay, so if I identify I have an outfall going to, one of the North Branch, the Raritan River, and it's causing some massive stream bank erosion, and I want to go in and I want to armor it. Either want to use a riprap apron like shown here, or I want to use a scour hole, or maybe I want to put in some stone like this, riprap channel, or maybe put in some gabions to step it down the hill. Either way, I'm working within the stream corridor. I need to get a permit for that. It takes 90 days to get a permit. But not only that, you're talking about a lot of stone, a lot of construction. You may not have this money in your budget. So one issue with this is going to be that you have a year to fix this, or you have to notify DEP of your plan to fix it beyond that 1 year. So in other words, hey, we found this problem. We figure we're gonna have to armor this section of the outfall, around the outfall. We don't have any money in our capital budget this year to do that, so we're gonna push it off to next year. That's gonna be a legitimate excuse for not doing this, but you need to have a plan to move forward. You can't just ignore it. Okay. So the last piece of this is the watershed improvement plan, and Tracy hinted at this earlier on. So many states throughout the nation have MS4 permits that require towns to go in and retrofit existing development with stormwater management. So in other words, most of the development in New Jersey was built before 2004, when the stormwater regulations were very good. A lot of these developments have no stormwater management at all. So one idea is to go in and how do we retrofit stormwater management, put stormwater management in those places to treat those older developments, and improve water quality and also reduce flooding. So that's what this watershed improvement plan is. So the idea is you got to focus on streams that are impaired, since all our waterways are impaired in New Jersey, most of them. It's not a problem. You have to know what the TMDL says. TMDL is total maximum daily load. For example, the TMDL for the North Branch, South Branch, and Lamington River say that you have to reduce total suspended solids and total phosphorus by 60 to 80%, depending where you are. Okay, so that would be what your target would be when you're doing this. You don't want to just look at reducing pollution going to the waterway. You also want to hold the water back and figure out how can you reduce some of the localized flooding. Okay, so they've got these 3 plans you have to prepare. Now, the EDPA is the effective date of the permit. So that was January 1st, 2023. So you got 3 years to do the inventory. So that inventory is that mapping that we had talked about. and part of that mapping is also delineating the drainage area of each outfall. Okay. The second phase is this watershed assessment report, which is due a year later. And the last piece is the watershed improvement plan, which is due at the end of the 5-year permit cycle. Now, we are currently working with the Raritan Headwaters and New Jersey Water Supply Authority to do watershed restoration plans for the South Branch, North Branch, and Lamington River. In those plans, we're going to have a lot of watershed improvement projects identified. So that's what we're talking about here, potential projects. So we'll have a lot of this stuff identified for towns, and they can simply pluck that out of that plan and put it in a watershed improvement plan. We're trying to make it as simple as possible for them to be able to do that. So that way they'll save a little bit of money in the long run. Otherwise, this is gonna cost an arm and a leg. And that's it. 45 minutes, right? That's what I had, Bill. Is that correct?
Yeah, that was great, Chris. Thanks so much.
I'm sorry I spoke so fast, but it's a hard topic,
It is.
It's a lot of information.
There's a lot going on there.
There's a lot of stuff going on. Yeah. Well, but I think the important thing to know, like, so if you're in a town, if you're a mayor, or business administrator in a town, or public works guys, there's a lot of stuff here. And your township council and committee needs to know all the stuff you're being asked to do by DEP, because this is going to cost money. And the place I see always gets cut is a DPW guy retires, and they say, well, we don't need to replace him. And so that's one less guy they have, but here now you're talking about street sweeping, catch basin cleaning. There's a lot of stuff going on here that has to happen. It's big expense. And I tell you right now that the piece of property taxes that people pay aren't covering this at all. I mean, I got a friend who's the head of public works, and a woman always calls him and yells at him and says, hey, this ditch is clogged in front of my house. You got to come clean it out. What am I paying taxes for? And he tells her, you're not paying taxes for me to clean the ditch. You're paying taxes for the school down the road. I'll come clean a ditch out because that's my job. But, I get about a nickel of your taxes. The rest goes to the schools. And he's right. Most of the money goes to education, and that's what we're paying for, and fixing the roads. And not a lot of that money's going to stormwater management, but DEP's just dumped this permit on. And by the way, this is not something that DEP, this didn't start with them. This started with EPA. This came out of Washington. So the whole MS4 permitting program started with EPA in DC and was handed down to the states to develop and implement. Okay, so it's really, if you're mad at DEP, a little of it could be, maybe you should be mad about the people in Washington instead. DEP's doing their best, and they're trying to help you as best they can in dealing with all this stuff. But it's going to be an expensive bill, and Bill's going to tell you how to work around that, right? How to do it more effectively, right, Bill?
That is my goal. Tracy, you want me to?
Yeah, I think we're gonna have you go, and then we'll address the questions and answers.
That's what I was gonna.
Right. I just want to make sure you can share your screen. Nice. Good job. Okay.
Now what I need to do here. Okay.
The far right bottom corner is the make it bigger.
That's what I'm after right there. Okay, perfect.
Yeah, you got it.
So Chris, thanks for the great lead in, and thank you for your presentation. Chris had a lot of information to get out to y'all, and it's all important information. So I'm going to be a little quicker so we can get right straight to the litany of questions that you no doubt have for Chris. Every time I spend some time with Chris, I learn something, and I'm sure you do too. So a lot of the things that Chris presented are going to create budget issues, or at least, potential budget issues for your municipality. These things cost money. We've got to figure out where that money comes from. It can come from the municipal budget, but at least most municipalities that I'm familiar with have budget challenges already, and to add more budget challenges to that can just make it more difficult. So one way to address that is to consider a stormwater utility. And I gave a presentation, a more detailed presentation on stormwater utilities a couple of years ago, so I'm not going to run everybody through the whole detailed spiel here on stormwater utilities. But I did want to kind of refresh your memory on stormwater utilities and give you some links to some really good resources where you can get more information on stormwater utilities. So I guess this is a rhetorical question. Is stormwater a problem? You all live here. You know the issues we have with stormwater. This is a photo I took on the South Branch back in Hurricane Irene 13 years ago. And I'm sure you all remember Irene and Lee well. The next year we got Sandy. So, you know, are our troubles over? Is that it? You know, we're not going to have hurricanes anymore, right? Well, this was in the New York Times a week or two ago. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration in May released its prediction for the storm season this year, coming up soon. And they expect 2024 will probably be the busiest storm season on record so far. NOAA is predicting 17 to 25 named storms, of which they expect 18 to 13 of those to become hurricanes, full-on hurricanes. How many of those we'll see in New Jersey, I don't know, but more storms certainly increases the probability that we'll see one of those named storms here. And you all know what it looks like when they hit. This is, by the way, the busiest storm season NOAA has ever predicted this early in the season. So 2024 is looking to be a big deal. What does that mean for us? Does that mean that this is going to be the worst storm season ever? Well, probably not, because what we know is that our issues with getting more frequent storms, more violent storms, storms with more water in a shorter period of time are increasing. So we're likely to see this issue, highly likely to see this issue continue. I know a lot of folks talk about the new normal. Well, the fact is, for stormwater, we haven't reached the new normal yet. What does that look like physically here in the Raritan Basin? I don't want to give away too much, but I was born in the early 60s. And since the early 60s here in the Raritan Basin, we get significantly more rain. So much so that we now today, on average, on an annual average, get 99 million gallons more rain than we got when I was born. 99 million gallons. That's enough to fill Round Valley, Wanakee Reservoir, and Spruce Run. And that's not total rain. That's just the additional amount of rain we get from what we got 60 years ago. So that impacts our communities. And, you know, Chris talked about some of those communities, or some of those impacts. How do we deal with those? Well, one way to deal with those is to consider forming a stormwater utility. Stormwater utilities aren't mandatory, they're optional. They can be formed at the municipal level. You can form them at the county level. You can form them at a regional level. So several municipalities could get together and partner on a stormwater utility. The concept behind a stormwater utility is much like any other utility. It's like a wastewater utility in that it collects fees from the people who use that utility. And then that money can be used, in this case, to address those stormwater issues that you have in your municipality or your county or your region. This is a way to generate that money that you know you need to address these stormwater issues moving forward. New Brunswick just recently, this is only last month, announced that they're creating a stormwater utility to address flooding downstream in the Raritan Basin. So this is one of our Raritan Basin neighbors. There are a number of other municipalities in the state that are either in the process of creating a stormwater utility or are at least doing the homework to determine whether a stormwater utility might be a good fit for them. I realize New Brunswick is a larger city than most of the folks in our watershed region, but they're in our neighborhood. They're in the Raritan Basin, so I kind of feel like that's instructive. Last time I gave this talk, we had a discussion about how much does this utility cost. New Brunswick expects that the monthly stormwater utility fee for a single-family residence in New Brunswick will be about $5 a month. $19.25 a quarter actually is what they're expecting. So roughly $5 a month for a private home. Now, if you happen to be the local Home Depot with all that parking space, obviously you're going to pay more, and you should. That's the intent behind the stormwater utility. Those who create or those who are contributing the most to our stormwater issues are those that have the most impervious cover. So think those big box stores, with the big box and then also with all the big parking. Those are the ones that are significant contributors to our flooding issues as well as our stormwater issues. So they would pay more than those with less impervious cover, with less hard surface on the property. And then as the stormwater utility can be set up in such a way so that if you're making efforts on site to address the stormwater issues, so that those stormwater issues don't leave your site, then you get a credit for that, and that helps. So we are seeing municipalities doing this. We're seeing some of our neighbors do this. So if you're wondering about folks you can talk to about their experience in creating a stormwater utility, there are folks you can talk to. I just wanted to leave you with a few resources, some resources that I've found very helpful for more information. The first thing here is the Clean Stormwater and Flood Reduction Act. This is the act that the legislature passed and the governor signed that actually allows municipalities, counties, regions to create a stormwater utility. You can create a separate utility as a stormwater utility, or you can add this task to one of your existing utilities, and then create this funding mechanism to provide the stormwater funding. This is locally generated money. So this money is generated within the utility district, and the money is spent within the utility district because it's a local utility with a local funding source. The funding is spent locally. This isn't money that goes to Trenton. This is money that gets spent locally or to Washington, D.C., as Chris pointed out. DEP also has this website that gives you more information on stormwater utilities. I will send my presentation to Tracy, and she can forward it to all of you so that you'll have these links. You don't need to write them down. We'll make sure that you get them. DEP's webpage has some great frequently asked questions, sort of things on stormwater utilities, and lays out the basics for stormwater utilities. This is also some places where you can get some more information. Flood Defense New Jersey, of which Raritan Headwaters is a part. Dr. Obropta participates in this as well. This is their webpage on the flood defense efforts in general. There's a nice big link right on that page to more information on stormwater utilities. These folks at Rutgers have great information on their website. Chris has made it as easy as you can imagine. It's water.rutgers.edu. Thank you, Chris. Your old webpage was harder to remember. This one, I can hardly forget. Water.rutgers.edu. Great resource. New Jersey Future also has resources specific to stormwater utilities. And then this last page is another page from Rutgers. This page actually has a whole host of publications on how to create a stormwater utility, how to set up the fee structure. It looks at what other stormwater utilities, not just in New Jersey, but nationwide, have done. New Jersey is not unique in seeking to create stormwater utilities. These are all over the United States. In fact, this is one of the few areas in which New Jersey was really behind the 8 ball in environmental policy. It took us a while to catch up, but we're getting there. And so with that, I'm going to hand it back to Tracy, and we can take your questions from there. Tracy, I'm going to stop sharing.
Okay, thank you, Bill.
So there were some questions, Tracy, in the chat that I noticed. One was about the county departments of transportation, state department of transportation.
I saw that.
And you know, the DOTs actually do have their own permit. They're supposed to be doing certain things, and I think whoever wrote the question was right. It doesn't look like they're doing anything, I don't think there's been a lot of enforcement on the county basis. I've been talking to Middlesex County Department of Transportation, and they were asking for our help to do some of this work because they're a little behind. So I think you'll see the counties are probably behind on their stormwater management stuff, but they do have a permit, and I think a new permit just came out this year for them. Because their 5-year permit cycles, I think it's a year behind what the towns are. So yeah, so they should have to do almost the same exact stuff that the towns have to do.
Fantastic. So I have asked Christy to sort of help field the Q&A. Are you there, Christy?
I am here.
Thank you, darling.
I saw Chris answering questions in the Q&A. And I think if we want, we can revisit some of them, but I do see a new one here. Could the stormwater rules be misused to allow poorly planned development and overdevelopment and overpopulation?
I think any regulation could be misused. I don't know, especially this one, but I think this is a very good attempt at doing the best they can do. The only thing that's really missing in this regulation is a stronger redevelopment component. And I think that's where we're missing out, because I think if you're going into basically what it says, if you're going into a 1 acre lot that's paved and you're going to put up a 1 acre townhouse building, you really don't have to do anything because you're not changing the amount of impervious cover. So, so that should be changed. I mean, if you're building new construction, you should have to invest some of your money in stormwater management, and they're working on that now in the next reiteration. So they're doing that already. The only other component that I see is a problem with stormwater regulation in general is we talk about managing peak flows as opposed to managing volume. So what happens is if we take a 50-acre site and was discharging 1 million gallons of stormwater was going into the ground, 1 million gallons of stormwater was washing off. When you put the houses up, you may have 3 million gallons of stormwater washing off, right? So the idea is that the regulations allow you to have that increased volume of runoff. They just require you to slow it down. So when that extra water gets into the stream, makes its way downstream, it joins other water that's being released at the same time and creates additional flooding issues. So that's one place where the regulations need to be improved, and we're trying to do some research here at Rutgers on the best way to do that. So and DEP understands those considerations, but yeah. So I don't know if that answers the question, Christy, but
I would agree with what Chris said. We're going to see continued population growth in New Jersey. And the Department of Environmental Protection knows that, as does everybody who lives here, I think. And the department has done a pretty good job with the newest stormwater regulations in trying to eliminate some of the issues that we had in the past with stormwater management, where we just weren't being forward-thinking enough in the way we manage stormwater. So, for example, until the new rules came out, we were using stormwater data that was very much outdated, and that made no effort whatsoever to consider where stormwater volumes and peak runoff was going to be 50 years from now, 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now. It was looking at old historical storms, which that's not what we get anymore. We know that. And so the issue was, for a long time, we were planning for the past instead of planning for the future. And the whole point of planning is to consider the future, right? So the department has done a good job, or at least certainly a much better job. They've taken a good step forward, in my opinion, in addressing some of that and making sure, or at least attempting to make sure, that the stormwater rules can't be abused by developers. Chris mentioned the redevelopment standard. The department last year or the year before released new stormwater rules that focused primarily on inland flooding, which is our watershed. So those were very important to us. We expect them to release on July 1st or thereabouts the next set of stormwater regulations, which are going to focus on the coastal areas, the shore, wetlands protections, and will, from what we're being told, will include a redevelopment standard for the first time. So that would require, where major redevelopment is being done, that stormwater management be upgraded on those sites. So that would be as Chris mentioned, that would be a big step forward and very important because, you know, a lot of New Jersey's already developed and we would like to see redevelopment of some of these areas that aren't being used anymore. But if we're going to redevelop them, we also need to recognize that we've got stormwater issues that need to be incorporated in that redevelopment. So that's it for me. Thanks.
What else you got, Christy? Anything good?
Yeah, well, I was actually just going to follow up on that. So when you're doing a redevelopment project, are you going to need to have the newer stormwater regulations incorporated in, or are you exempt from that?
There's no exemptions to the rules
Okay.
at all. So that if the rules are applicable to your situation, you're disturbing more than 1 acre, you're adding more than a quarter acre of impervious cover, you need to comply with the regulations. I don't care, you know, when your development was proposed, you know, it's what's the current regulations now. Now, what's happening now though is like, so there's some developments that are pushed forward, you know, just a couple of months ago in my town, and they're using the old rainfall numbers. And that's because my town has yet to adopt the new stormwater control ordinance with the new rainfall numbers in it. That wasn't required until just recently that be adopted. So there's always a time frame when the rules kick in. There's like a year to get the ordinances in line so that we can enforce the rules. So there's that little bit of a lag time. But there's never, you know, hey, we built half a development 20 years ago, so we don't have to do this. No, sorry, you got to comply. Yeah.
And for stormwater utilities, what that means is that none of those properties would be exempt from paying into a stormwater utility. So if you've got a church or a school or a hospital, which normally is a nonprofit entity or isn't taxed, and therefore they're not paying into the municipal budget or the school budget, that's not the case with a stormwater utility because a utility is not a tax. It's a utility. So the stormwater utility functions like a water utility. If your school is using water, which they do, then they have to pay for the water they're using with the water utility. If they're generating wastewater, they have to pay the wastewater utility to treat that wastewater. In this case, if they're generating stormwater, whether it's a school, a church, a hospital, whatever, if they're generating stormwater, then they would have to pay into the stormwater utility to help treat that stormwater and to deal with the stormwater issues in the municipality, which when you think about it, is it's a much more equitable way of dealing with utility costs. So for example, I mentioned New Brunswick earlier. New Brunswick estimated that 51% of the property in New Brunswick is tax exempt. So that what that means is that roughly half the folks in New Brunswick are paying the tab for the other half, for everybody. Set up a stormwater utility and everybody pays their fair share, so that half the population isn't paying for the whole stormwater utility. Everybody pays for the stormwater utility.
So this is a really good question, probably useful for anybody who has to review development applications. So if there is a lot that's being redeveloped, but the percentage of impervious surface is not changing, do they need to add stormwater infrastructure?
For the most part, no. Unless you're disturbing 1 acre. So there's disturbing 1 acre and there's adding a quarter acre of impervious cover. You can disturb an acre without adding a quarter acre of impervious cover, then you got to comply, right? But if it's a smaller lot and they're not adding enough impervious cover, then there's really little they have to do, unless you're in one of those towns that have adopted the enhanced stormwater control ordinance that the Watershed Institute has been promoting. And that ordinance basically says, well, if you add as much as 400 square feet of impervious cover, you have to do something. And I think it's managing 2 gallons of water for each square foot of impervious cover you're adding or something. So there's things you have to do. And Cranford has had this for a long time because they're at build out and all they're seeing is houses getting knocked down and bigger houses being built. So as to compensate for that, they've been asking those homeowners to do something to manage stormwater as part of the regulations. So once again, we're a home rule state. If your town cares about stormwater, you care that your town has a lot of localized flooding, this may be something you might want to do is pass the enhanced stormwater control ordinance that has a minor development component and makes those smaller projects you're talking about, Chrissy, do a little something to manage stormwater, at least do their share, you know?
Yeah. So it's an opportunity, but the municipalities would need to have that enhanced stormwater ordinance. in
Right, they'd have to
place.
take that opportunity, yeah.
Mhm. Here's another question about applications. So current applications that are in front of planning boards right now, are they exempt from the changes due by July 1st?
Yeah, I'm
In
not
most
sure.
cases, the answer to that is probably yes. Once an application is deemed administratively complete, then it's subject to the rules and regulations that are in effect at the time it was deemed administratively complete. But typically with planning boards, the planning board, let me back up a little bit. So the stormwater regulations are state regulations. And if, as the state updates regulations, developments would be required, or developers would be required to meet the regulations that are in place at the time typically they start building. What that means really is they will have to get permits from the department, and those permits will be, it'll be an issue for when those permits are put in. Most planning boards put a condition in the approval of projects that the project is going to have to meet all state and federal statutes and regulations in place at the time the construction begins. So the municipality wouldn't have the ability to grandfather a development from state regulations. So short answer is it depends on when they get what the status of their state permits are.
Okay. I think we've been dealing with this a bit in our watershed region. So if you are an agricultural operation and you want to build new structures on the property, do you need to comply with the new stormwater rules?
What do you think, Bill? I'm not sure what the answer to that is. There's a right to farm. That's a problem. That's what conflicts with
Yeah,
that.
the issue is the Right to Farm Act. Whoever you are, anonymous attendee, do me a favor and send me an email, and I will check the answer to this for you. I believe that the answer is they're still required to comply, because the Right to Farm Act provides certain exemptions to local ordinances. It does not exempt farms from state and federal laws and regulations. So,
But the stormwater control ordinance is a local ordinance, though.
yeah, the stormwater control ordinance would be a local ordinance, so it's possible that the Right to Farm Act would trump that. That's something I'll have to look at.
Yeah. That's a great question. I'd love to know the
Yeah, it
answer,
is.
Bill.
Very good question. All right, Chris, you email me, I'll send it to you too.
Thanks, I appreciate it.
I know where to find you.
Okay, any more questions? Someone raising their hand.
Oh, no, but warehouses are exempt from stormwater regulations, right, Bill? Is that something that happened, right?
Oh, no.
No, they're not exempt? Okay, I thought they were exempt.
I am confident in stating categorically that warehouses are not
not
exempt
exempt.
from stormwater regulations.
What's
Wow.
interesting about warehouses, though, is they're big structures, and each system can only manage 2.5 acres. So it makes it difficult to use green infrastructure when you're building warehouses. So it's going to be a little tricky in those plans, I think, as they move forward.
We are dealing with in fact, I was at a planning board hearing last night until about 11:30 in Roxbury, where a developer has proposed putting in about 2.5 million square feet of warehouse. And yeah, you're exactly right, Chris. How that's so much impervious cover between 2.5 million square feet of warehousing, plus the service roads, plus the parking areas. It becomes very, very challenging to adequately address that stormwater on site. Very difficult.
This is a very good question here, the $1 million question. Who will enforce the regulations?
The Raritan Headwaters Association. Well, truthfully, the
Sounds like
MS4
Bill.
rules, it's funny because the MS4, somebody asked earlier about the MS4 rules, do they have enough staff to go and do audits all the towns? And I think DEP's goal is to at least audit every town once during the 5-year permit cycle. But if they come to your town year 4 of the permit, they're going to look at the past 4 years of what you did. They're going to look at everything. I've been in some of those audit meetings, and DEP brings 6, 7, 8 people to the meeting. And they rip apart the development applications and all the stuff that you've done. And it was funny because they weren't looking to say, I gotcha. They were looking to say, here's what you missed. As you move forward, do it this way. And it was really very helpful. And I was pretty amazed by that, So I'm not sure how that audit process is going to work. Eventually, someone's going to have to start getting fined, and that's the way people are going to comply. Like, who's going to enforce it? I just need 3 or 4 towns to get heavy fines, and then I think the other towns will follow suit and start complying, right? So not that I'm advocating for fines. I can't advocate for anything because I'm a Rutgers employee. All I can advocate for is good science. But that might be a way you see happen is one of the nonprofits wind up suing DEP that they're not enforcing the regulations. DEP turns around and enforces the regulations, fines a few towns. Other towns hear about it, and they all talk to each other. That November meeting, League of Municipalities are all chatting about that stuff. And that'll be it. They'll come back all worried. You don't want to be the mayor who gets a $500,000 fine from DEP. That's not going to look good on your re-election bid.
Yeah, that doesn't look good when it's campaign time, does it?
No,
Christy, Rodney has his hand up.
Yes, I'm trying to allow him to speak. Rodney, are you able to speak and ask your question?
He has to unmute himself.
Can you unmute yourself?
There he is.
There you go.
Oh, Rodney, you went back on mute.
Try again, Rodney. Rodney.
He was unmuted for a second.
Yeah, he was.
Oh, we lost him.
Oh, Rodney.
He just hung up on me.
Okay, well, while we're waiting for that, question from Frederick Roll. Will there be any more grants available for stormwater?
That's an excellent question. And I don't know the answer to that. But
Wait,
that
there's
is one of the
Rodney.
questions. Okay,
There's
that is
Rodney,
one
I
of the
think.
questions
Yes,
that we
I'm
have
unmuted
presented to DEP.
Rodney.
Okay, we'll come back to that question. Rodney, would you like to ask your question?
I did not have one. I'm sorry. I might have
your hand is up.
I might have accidentally raised my hand when I was trying to get my chat to work. To let you know.
Oh, that's
That's
probably
okay.
what happened. Well, welcome, Rodney. Good to have you on board anyways, and I'm glad we could answer your question.
Yes, I've been here the whole
I
time.
like questions like that.
I get credit for that one. I'll take that question. That was a good one.
Oh, and I have a question about the presentations today. Could these presentations be used as the educational material required for the municipal staff?
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah.
Water?
Yeah. I would certainly do that. I mean, I've done similar presentations to this for public works guys in Woodbridge and in Hamilton Township, and really focusing more for the public works guys on what they have to do. So less about what the requirements are for the whole town. I mean, giving an overview of that because they need to know how it fits into the bigger picture. But how many times they have to clean a catch basin, how many times it's street sweep. Focus on that. What do they have to do with the material once they collect it? So we focus a lot on that for public works guys, but for the whole town, this would be a great presentation for the whole town. I tailored this to try to just hit all the different topics and regulations, just to show people the breadth of the regulations and how overwhelming it is, for one, right? And when you start cutting up into smaller pieces, it's not that bad. It's manageable, but it's still going to take effort, still going to take time and resources. And I think that's what's going to be really important. But yeah, this would be a great presentation to give the town. I'm sure Christy and Tracy would love to do that. I'll send you the PowerPoint. You guys can go deliver it.
Yeah, we'll hit the road.
There you go.
We have a van.
We do.
Watershed watchdog.
Yes, we do.
And someone's asking, we will make this presentation available to everyone. It'll be on our website, but Tracy will also email it to
I
all
will.
the people who registered.
Yep.
And if for some reason you'll get a PDF from me for the presentation, but if you need PowerPoint slides, let me know. It's just a huge file. We can
Yeah.
upload it to our website. You can download it.
Okay.
But we just try to give out the PDF. A lot of people just convert the PDF to a PowerPoint pretty easily, but if you don't have that capabilities, let me know and I can get you the PowerPoint slides. Okay.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks for having us over. This was great. We should do this
Yeah.
again soon.
We should. We will.
Okay.
Well, thanks very much to everybody who attended today.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Take
Thank
care.
you
Thanks,
for the great
everybody.
presentations.
Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.